This is Andy Gutierrez from StarWars.com, and you are listening to Coffee with Kenobi with Dan Z. This is the podcast you're looking for.
This is Vanessa Marshall, Harrison Dula from Star Wars Rebels, and you're listening to Coffee with Kenobi.
Hello, my friends, and welcome to Coffee with Kenobi show number 509. This is your spoiler-free place for Star Wars community and conversation. I'm your host, Dan Zare, thrilled to be talking Star Wars with each and every one of you. You can support Coffee with Kenobi by following the show on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, Pinterest, and TikTok, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. Help spread the word by tweeting that you're listening, share it on Facebook, or invite your friends and family to tune in and share a cup of coffee with us. Thank you to MEI and Mouse Fan Travel, our official travel partner. This is the place to go for your no-cost, no-obligation quote. Please let them know that Coffee with Kenobi and Dan Zare sent you at www.coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefantravel. On today's show, Claudia Gray returns to Coffee with Kenobi to talk about a spoiler-filled discussion of The Fallen Star. This is certainly spoiler-filled, unlike our normal shows, but you are officially warned here, so if you have not finished the book or want to finish it before you listen, please go ahead and pause it. We'll be waiting for you happily, and come back and join us when you are done enjoying this amazing book. So pull up a chair, grab your favorite coffee mug, and let's have some Coffee with Kenobi. Returning to Coffee with Kenobi is the author of The Fallen Star, New York Times bestselling author Claudia Gray. Claudia, welcome back to the show.
Thank you for having me.
Of course, it must be internally rewarding to hear the words New York Times bestselling author when you're introduced.
It is nice. It happened for me before Star Wars, but I got to tell you, it never gets old. So
No.
never, ever. And as of Into the Dark, thanks to you guys, I get to say #1 New York Times bestselling author. That never had happened before. So thanks to every one of you.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for putting out continually amazing work in the Star Wars universe and beyond. So now it's been several months since The Fallen Star has come out. It's definitely fair to say that the status quo of the galaxy, the end of The Fallen Star, is dramatically different than it is at the beginning. And we will be spoiling things. So if you still have not finished the book, please pause this. Claudia and I will be happy to wait for you when you come back and hit play again. But we're going to talk a lot about spoilers. And again, The Fallen Star, it's much different than it was at the beginning. Your pacing of this novel builds beautifully, leading to several shocking moments throughout. From a structural perspective, what are some of the things that you do as a writer that helps to build suspense for the climax while still giving necessary narrative weight to the steps that lead to the finale?
I wish that I could say I had it intellectualized out in that same way, that I was like, yes, this is the exact process that I follow. But the truth is, dating myself a little bit here, but I grew up watching on TV sort of the big disaster movies of the 60s and 70s, Irwin Allen productions, like The Towering Inferno or Airport, or my all-time favorite, The Poseidon Adventure. And while a lot of aspects of these movies can be super cheesy, they also are masters of exactly that. They build on a problem, and it's never just, oh, what will happen? And then the thing happens. The disaster in all these movies takes the largest part of the story. We get everybody onto the Poseidon, we start the party, and then, tidal wave, your cruise ship is upside down, and it's a problem you never thought you'd have. Nobody says like, oh, I wonder what will happen if. And now the whole rest of the movie is about battling to stay alive and get out. And The Towering Inferno works the same way, etc. So I think that's just very much ingrained for me as a fan first, but then as a storyteller, the idea that a disaster is most interesting if you're able to sink into it and take your time with it and really experience the disaster as it's happening. One thing blowing up, the Death Star is great, but there's no story about somebody on the Death Star. You know, they're typing, they're gone. That's basically that story. Whereas with something like this, you want to have the disaster unfold slowly over time so that you see several different attempts to reckon with it, several different character reactions, and that way I think it really builds it so much more as a character piece. And of course it's scary because waiting for the disaster to culminate, that's suspense is always terrifying.
It's really remarkable because though that is some excellent comparisons I hadn't really considered before. But yeah, the way that they build, it's almost like, and I know I made it a metacognitive idea, but the way that this happens, it's organic because we sort of have ingrained in us an understanding of, where the end is coming, sort of like the Titanic, but it's the buildup that
Yes.
leads to the tension that makes you care so much about these characters.
Yeah, Titanic is also excellent at that. And honestly, the first bit of Titanic, which is also in some ways a really cheesy movie, but it does the
Hmm.
disaster part well. But the thing that it does that I think is genius. Um, Sorry, this is just me going off as a fangirl, but the
No,
thing that
please.
really does is genius is a lot of disaster movies. A lot of them begin with like, "Oh, who would be such a fool as to go up in the building that's the towering inferno? Why is everybody going to the party on the towering inferno? Oh, look, someone has left." This really happens in the movie, like a gas can and some rags next to the faulty wiring in the towering inferno. It's like, come on, somebody. Um, and a lot of, and even earlier Titanic movies, they play to a very, audiences love the idea like, I'm smarter than this. I would know not to do this. I'd know better. Whereas the beginning of Titanic, James Cameron makes it clear that ship was beautiful. It was sophisticated. It was glamorous. It looks amazing. When they start up the engines and you see those still like shining new, mechanical parts like begin to work, like there's this tremendous sense of power and energy. And like if you had been there then at that time and you'd had a chance to go on the Titanic, you'd have done it. Why wouldn't you get on that ship? That looks great. It's fantastic. You know, um, and hopefully the earlier parts of the High Republic Initiative played that part for Starlight Beacon. It is a symbol of hope. It is a tremendous place to be. Uh, but then, you have the disaster. And again, with Titanic, it took, a few hours for it to sink. And James Cameron used that time very well to have a lot of different things happen. There's a lot of potential outs that fail. And also, people keep leading their lives. They don't stop having their own emotional feelings and crises just because this other thing has happened. In the case of Titanic, I think they take it to a little bit of an extreme because I forget his name, but David Warner, the one that works for Cal,
Sure.
Rose's fiance, like he's up to
Yes.
his waist in water and he's still chasing Jack with a gun. And I'm always thinking, like, how much is Cal paying this guy? Because he is dedicated to the job. He is staying on this long after I think most people would have been like, I choose to terminate my employment right now and get on a lifeboat. But but in terms of the Fallen Star, you have that time, you need that time. And I definitely wanted the large majority of the book, or a large part of the book. I don't know if it is a huge majority, but a large part of the book to be about being trapped. I read a book years ago that was about how people behave in life-threatening situations. And everybody thinks they know how they're going to act in a crisis. But the facts are people behave in some very strange ways. And it's very ingrained within us. And logic doesn't necessarily take over. You don't necessarily react the way you would hope to react. And what's worse, a lot of like emergency protocols that are followed, by building management or whatever, are designed for how people think people will react in emergency and not how they do. Um, sorry, I'm just kind of going off on that. But anyway, how people react in this sort of situation has always been interesting to me. And one thing from that book I've never forgotten was the woman said, people think, oh, everybody's going to panic. People don't tend to panic very often, like mass panic. It's not the most common thing. She said it really happens in two situations. One, people can't breathe. Like if you have a stampede or a crush or something, and people begin to lose the ability to breathe freely, they lose it, obviously. And two, she said they don't panic when they know they're trapped. They panic when they think they're trapped. They're probably trapped, but maybe there's an out. Maybe, but what is it? That's what creates panic. When you know absolutely there's no way, people are actually fairly calm. But anyway, what you have in the situation on Starlight is people think they're trapped. And so you get to really build on that tension and have them like looking desperately for the way out.
That's great. And just like Jaws, for example, if you don't care about Chief Brody, then the end of Jaws doesn't really matter all that much. So it's the humanity. To me, it's always the humanity in this fictional universe that has the Force, that has starships, that has Darth Vader. If you don't have the humanity of the characters, then it doesn't have the necessary narrative weight. And this one is full of that. I mean, all three of the adult novels that we have for the High Republic have had their share of shock and heartbreak, but the pathos quotient is raised exponentially in The Fallen Star. Do you personally, as a writer, have to gear up for a writing task of this magnitude differently from other works, especially since you are a fan of these characters as well as a writer?
Yes, though, I mean, obviously, as a writer, you always hope that the emotional stakes are significant, even if they're not quite on the epic scale of, oh my gosh, a space station is crashing. That's obviously huge. But even if you're writing something like the murder mystery that I'm currently working on, like it has to really feel like it matters that you know who this is. You always have to have that there. But yeah, when you've been involved in something as deeply as we've all been involved in the High Republic for the last years, I mean, High Republic just dominates my experience of lockdown by far. So yeah, that really, I think, would play more into it, like being especially intense for me, is because it's been such a big part of my life, and the characters have been such a big part of my life during such a weird time when work has really been the only thing to concentrate on for a lot of it. Does that make sense?
It does. Absolutely. Well, I was wondering about that because, I mean, again, there are plenty of spoilers in this episode. So if you haven't finished the book, this will be a great time to stop. All right, you've been warned. So we're going to talk about some of the key deaths in The Fallen Star. I would love your take on the impact on each one of these as you're writing them as a writer, as well as the mood each one may manifest for us as readers. We'll start with Reginald Cole.
Yeah, poor Reginald.
Yeah.
He unfortunately, like, that had less impact for me because he was he was kind of a red shirt, but he had to have somebody die. And we went ahead and introduced him a little bit earlier than this, but what came to me was sort of the idea that he had been this guy had worked in the creche, and he was kind of making dad jokes once in a while and being very low key in a way that we don't often see the Jedi being. That I got very affectionate toward him, even though, like I said, he was marked for death from the get-go. But I felt like he got to have a little bit of soul and personality in that story. So that was good.
It was, and Mark really gave him sort of an extra flair too with the accent as well.
Mm-hmm.
So this one, and last time you were on the show, we talked about Orla Jareni briefly, and I didn't say anything. But this one, talk about a sucker punch.
Yeah, that one was hard because I really, really enjoyed her as a character. I still feel there's a lot more we could have done with her, but if you only take out the characters that feel like they might be done, then that takes away a lot of suspense, and that's not how it would work. The idea is that this scythe is swinging and it's going to hit who it's going to hit. And so having somebody who was really just as vital and in some ways as feisty and iconoclastic as Orla, she would probably be the last one that you would think of sort of falling in the defenses of this station. But it was the right thing to do story wise. We all agreed on this, and I did my best to keep her vital and active to the end. I think her interactions with Stellan in this are really critical to the book as a whole.
Oh, I agree. She's an excellent foil for both Stellan and for Elzar. And I think early on in the book, when she is working with Elzar to help him sort of figure out his place in the Force and sort of his own identity crisis that he's having, she's just so instrumental. And I think that makes you care even more when she does meet her end.
Yeah. Yeah. And I've also, because of the way the leveler affects the Jedi, I thought it was kind of important to have a Jedi who does do things so very differently be equally at risk from it and vulnerable to it.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Well, then finally, Stellan Geos. I don't know if this was intentional or maybe it is, but to me, I after I finished the novel, I thought, well, the title of this book is literal, but it's also a metaphor for Stellan. Let's talk about the death of Stellan Geos.
It worked out that way, but the book was titled before Stellan died in it. Stellan survived the first draft, but I knew his story wasn't landing right. And for all the death and mayhem that had happened, I was like, you know what? If you want to really feel Starlight going, if you want to really feel it, like there has to be a death on that scale. And we all had a meeting about it and talked about it, again, via Zoom, I would say for a solid hour. And I was like, I think this has to happen. And much to my surprise, very quickly on, pretty much everybody was going, yes, you're right. I don't know why we didn't see this before. Because, Stellan symbolizes the order as it wants to see itself at this point in time. And what the Nile do to Starlight kind of destroys that image. It really gets at the confidence and the self-knowledge of the Jedi themselves. And that symbolic character, he really has to fall in that. And once I knew that, like, it really gave me deeper on the idea of Stellan questioning his role. That was already in there to an extent, but I felt like it really let me go deep with it and have him fully face this crisis of identity and come out on the other side. Because, for all that Stellan dies, I hope that his last scenes read as a victory, because they are. He's not only saving a lot of people on the ground, he has found himself. He has reconnected with his purpose and his identity as a Jedi rather than as a member of the Jedi Order, if you understand the distinction there that I'm trying to get at.
Certainly.
I feel like he is, in his last scene, in most ways, he is happier and more confident and more centered, really, than I think we've ever seen him be at any point beforehand.
Oh, I agree. I think he's completely found his place. And honestly, if there's no cost, there has to be cost. Otherwise, these books don't have the narrative weight and power that they do. So I agree. It made the most sense. It had to happen. And I found his ending to be, of course, tragic and heartbreaking, but also quite beautiful. It reminded me quite a bit, and I'm sure I'm not the only person to think this, of the end of the original Captain America film, the way that Steve Rogers
Yeah,
sacrificed his
yeah,
own life.
that definitely was in my mind to some extent, and to some extent, I mean, there are parallels between Stella and Captain America. It's like, oh,
Sure.
you've created me and held me up to be this ideal, but is the way you're using me as an ideal actually the best thing that I can be doing? Is there another way for me to go about this? So that parallel is there too. So the parallel in the end sequence felt right.
That's great. Yeah, and I agree. He saves a lot of lives, but he also saves himself and his identity. There's also a number of ambiguous deaths that I'm not going to talk about with you specifically. We'll kind of let life marinate on that one. But bravo for keeping us as readers as uncertain as Belle Zettifar is in the novel itself.
Yes. Yes.
I love it. We'll just leave that one there. To me, a big standout about this novel is the impressive amount of narrative weight each character and storyline holds. To me, again, not only as a consumer, but as an English teacher, this is a rarity in novels. To me, also, this is a bar for telling a story with multiple main characters. Talk about the rhythm of this novel and the balancing act it beautifully achieves.
Yeah, ensemble casts. And I've really only written true ensemble pieces in Star Wars. And I think this and Into the Dark have been much more so than even my previous Star Wars work. So, obviously you worry about moving too far away from some storylines at some times, and it's inevitable that there are going to be pauses in some places, but in a disaster like this, there are stretches of inactivity for one person when another person may have a lot to do. The pacing of it shouldn't be equally intense for every storyline at every moment, or else I think it begins to feel a little bit mechanical. So we got to go back and forth and see what was happening, and a lot of that was dictated just by the mechanics of getting the station down and how it's crashing and what's going on as the station breaks in two, etc. And some of it was dictated by where the people were. And anytime we had a moment where I was like, okay, this is really getting a lot, it's like, it's time for Geode. And then Geode, of course, would have critical functions, which he does.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, I think he saves a life, and I think he wins a gunfight and does a lot of things.
And perhaps my most like laugh out loud moment, he's actually something of a flirt too.
Yeah. Women, we love those strong silent types. There's something to it.
That's fantastic. Well, Claudia, again, it's been absolutely wonderful chatting with you uh, about the High Republic, about the Fallen Star, just hearing your take on the writing process. Again, selfishly as a teacher, I like that part of it. What can you share with all of us about future writing projects?
Well, let's see. In May, I have my first murder mystery coming out. It's called The Murder of Mr. Wickham. It's a Jane Austen, Agatha Christie mashup. You've got characters from all 6 of Jane Austen's novels together for a house party. Mr. Wickham, like Austen's rogues and a lot of Christie villains, turns out to have his fingers in many different pies and to have messed with a lot of people's lives, not just Elizabeth and Darcy's. And, when he finally gets what's coming to him, everybody in the house is sort of stuck there, and we have to figure out who did it. And the main sleuths, because the books are sort of stretched out over a longer period of the Regency, which lasted 20 years, the main sleuths are the son of Elizabeth and Darcy and the daughter of Henry and Catherine from Northanger Abbey. So I've had so much fun writing that. I can't even tell you. It's a very different thing for me to be doing. That's coming out very early in May. And the book I'm finishing right now is actually its sequel. So I'm having a lot of fun with that.
So I have taught Pride and Prejudice for probably 13 years.
Wow.
I dare I say I know that novel, parts of that novel by heart. I think I'm more excited about this than I am about any Star Wars project. Sorry, everybody, but are you kidding me? This sounds so great. Oh my goodness.
I have had so much fun with it. I cannot even tell you. I'm a huge Austen fan of all the books, and really getting to delve into it. And to some extent, like, it is a murder mystery, but it's also a little bit of a mini sequel to each of the books in a different way. So you find out further things that have happened in the marriage of Emma and Knightley, or what happens when Fanny Price finally stands up to Edmund about something. Getting to dig into those things was the best. And, of course, Elizabeth and Darcy, I loved them. I loved creating the character of their son, Jonathan. And I think the relationship between the three of them is one of my favorite things about the book. Hopefully readers will love it too. First Tuesday in May.
Listening to Coffee with Kenobi, you are, with Dan Z, the podcast you're looking for. This is...
A huge thank you to Claudia Gray for joining us to have a spoiler-filled conversation about her amazing book, The Fallen Star. A very, very powerful sequence of events happen in the High Republic novel that I know many of you are going to be talking about and have been ever since the book came out. I also want to thank MEI and Mouse Fan Travel, a great place to go for a no-cost, no-obligation quote where they can help you plan your magical vacation to the Galactic Star Cruiser, Galaxy's Edge, the theme parks, the cruise lines, and even Star Wars Celebration. You can also support Coffee with Kenobi in the process by going to MEI and Mouse Fan Travel at www.coffeewithkenobi.com/mousefantravel. Join us Monday nights at 7 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time at CWK Live at www.coffeewithkenobi.com/live to reflect and discuss with us as we rewatch Star Wars Rebels. We are now on Episode 3, Droids in Distress. That'll be this coming Monday night at 7 o'clock p.m. Central Standard Time. I hope to bring you there, and please bring a friend and a family member with you so we can all take part in this family-friendly, enjoyable discussion about Star Wars Rebels. CWK Cafe is your Facebook group for Star Wars thoughts, comments, reviews, and opinions, and a family-friendly, spoiler and drama-free place where you can post pictures, your thoughts, and so much more about this amazing galaxy of ours. I also want to thank you. Coffee with Kenobi is possible because of you, our members of the CWK Alliance. Thanks to you, the podcast, Facebook Live, event coverage, and so much more comes to life. Find out how you can help the show for as little as $1 a month by joining the CWK Alliance, and you will receive access to CWK Pour-Over, an exclusive weekly audio and video podcast not heard anywhere else at www.coffeewithkenobi.com/CWK Alliance. And 10% of your monthly contributions go directly to St. Jude Children's Hospital. www.coffeewithkenobi.com is your place for Star Wars news, announcements, reviews, videos, and so much more. And you can email me at danz@coffeewithkenobi.com. Connect with me on Twitter at Mr. Zer, MRZEHR, on Instagram, DanZerCWK, and also on LinkedIn. Coffee with Kenobi is all over social media on Twitter, Instagram, Pinterest, and TikTok. Give the show a like on Facebook at facebook.com/coffeewithkenobi, or subscribe to Coffee with Kenobi's YouTube channel. Please take a couple of minutes to rate and review the show on iTunes, Google Podcasts, or Spotify. If you like the Coffee with Kenobi logo, go to www.coffeewithkenobi.com/shop for t-shirts, mouse pads, and so much more. If you are starting a podcast or a blog or want to expand your brand, I am available at danzmedia.com where you can schedule a consultation. I can help you get that process started. I am also available to come to your school, conference, business, or organization, talk about how to tap into your strengths and help you bring out your very best. Have a wonderful rest of your week and weekend, everybody. Be sure to do your homework and watch Star Wars Rebels Season 1, Episode 3, Droids in Distress, and get your top 5 ready, and it will be heard throughout everywhere people listen to Coffee with Kenobi. Have a great one, everybody, and remember, this is a podcast you're looking for.
This podcast is not endorsed by the Walt Disney Company or Lucasfilm Limited. It is intended for entertainment and informational purposes only. The official Star Wars website can be found at www.starwars.com. Star Wars, all names, sounds, and any other Star Wars-related items are registered trademarks and or copyrights of Disney and their respective trademark and copyright holders. All original content of this podcast is the intellectual property of Coffee with Kenobi unless otherwise indicated.
This is the podcast you're looking for.